Game 1 of the NBA Finals was last night as we record on a Friday morning. Make sure you had some time to look some stuff over again, get some numbers in here on my front, all that good stuff. But the Boston Celtics striking the first blow in the finals, a 107-89 victory. They naturally have a 1-0 series lead. Kristaps with 20 off the bench, Jaylen Brown with 22. Quiet shooting night for Jayson Tatum, who did add 11 rebounds and 5 assists with his 16 points, 12 for Drew, 10 and 7 for Al Horford going down the line. We'll get into more of the player stats a little bit later in the show. But I guess for me, I entered the series as we did our preview, and I asked about the stars first and foremost. Who's going to match up with them? And more so on the Boston side defensively than the Dallas side, since it seemed more straightforward. How are the stars going to be guarded? What exactly did Boston want to do against Luka? What did they want to do against Kyrie? And on the flip side, what could Dallas do to kind of make Boston bend? And I think what we both kind of landed on was Boston's going to switch a ton, as they have all year long. They're going to sprinkle in some drop against Luka and against Kyrie. Boston has not been a team that wants to put two on the ball or to just flat out blitz pick and rolls. That's been the case during the regular season. That's also been the case during the postseason. And what played out in the game one was Boston sticking to those principles and not allowing Dallas to generate more fruitful threes in particular. Like the 3-point volume was just super low for Dallas in this basketball game. Only took 27 threes. That's tied for the second lowest 3-point attempt total for Dallas this year. Not just this postseason, but this year. They had 25 in game one against Minnesota, which just a funny basketball game altogether in hindsight. But overall, like there was the mix of switching. There was the drop. There were a couple of occasions to where you saw Luka try to string out a pick and roll and you got Al Horford or Kristaps at the level. But ultimately, there was no blitzing in this game. And because Dallas could not get two on the ball consistently against Boston, and ultimately when they did get switches or get drops, they weren't able to make enough shots collectively to make Boston bend from that. You kind of got the shot profile that you got. A lot of mid-range shots, a lot of short mid-range shots. They got to the rim and got some shots there, but you had to deal with Kristaps Porzingis, particularly in that first quarter, and he was just incredible in this one. And as a lot of people talk about the corner three stat in particular, only 4 corner threes for Dallas in the game. A lot of it was dictated by Boston. I guess zooming out, I feel like Boston just kind of established themselves. They really set the tone on both ends of the floor in this one. It kind of starts with the defense for me.
Well, I think if you bring it back to the preview pod, and we talked about Boston's personnel and what they wanted to do and the mindset they had. So you mentioned the principles. I think you have to look at how they treated Luka Doncic and how they treated Kyrie Irving and then build the boat around that. They came out right out the gate and said, Al Horford, you got Derrick Jones Jr. Jayson Tatum, you have Gafford. Jaylen, you got Luka. We're going to turn that into a switch. We're going to try and take these pick and rolls away. Luka, you have the space and the floor to do what you want. We are staying at home. So if you go back and look, one of the biggest things you'll see, watch the white jerseys. Watch the Boston Celtics help defense not move. That's the biggest key that Dallas has to flip. So Luka had room to operate, and he could look to get going. Kyrie, on the other hand, hey, I'm Drew Holiday. Nice to meet you. How about I navigate all these screens? And just in case you might get by me, there's a big right here, just in case, if we're not switching. So we're determined to take away your space. You're the person that we're locking in on. And so I think it's, for me, when you talk about the corner three stats, when you talk about the Dallas offense, their biggest thing that they're going to have to figure out is how do we get to poking at Boston's defense to get them to react in a way that now allows us to open up some of these plays for other people. How do we get everyone else involved? Can we get drives from PJ Washington and Derrick Jones Jr. to now get in the paint? Is that the way that we get Boston to rotate? Or is it Kyrie coming out the gates, knocking down shots? And now, what do we think about this? Is it Luka in the post, knocking down shots? What do we think about this? Can we get to the foul line? I think that's one of the things. Because I think overall, and again, I give Boston a ton of credit defensively. We'll get back to that. But on the Dallas side, you're thinking, okay, if Kyrie goes 6 of 19 from the field, that's a win for Boston. We mentioned that in the preview. 2 assists, that's a win for Boston. 0 free throws attempted, that's a win for Boston. And so this is one of those things, and it's probably a theme we'll talk about. I don't think this is a series shifting win, but it's absolutely if these are the terms of engagement, we have your number. And so I think the little things that stood out from Boston defensively, if we need to sprinkle in an Al Horford switch, we're fine with that. We're going to stick with taking away the role. We're going to stay out of rotation. I think being able to bring Porzingis off the bench was important because Dallas was like, hey, actually, big fella, let's put you in action. Let's put you in pick and roll. He was guarding Derrick Jones Jr. So the pop, he wasn't afraid of the pop. Boston wasn't going to rotate to the pop. And when Derrick Jones Jr. did roll, Porzingis was there. So even if he got behind him and Luke was able to snake and find him, Porzingis did a good job of contesting. So that held up. And so I think, number one, it's on Dallas to flip it, but Boston, again, stuck with their core principles. We're gonna make you guys make these plays. We're not gonna open things up, and you gotta make us do something different.
Yeah, and just to quickly bounce off of the Kristaps point, like as you mentioned, Derrick Jones Jr. rolling, getting the contest there. Like there was a possession, I'll say midway through or later in the first quarter, where you got that exact example, and you get the challenge at the rim to miss Boston off to the races. I think in terms of setting the tone, Boston let it be known very early on, not just with the matchups, with the schemes defensively, in terms of the pace. Oh, this is going to be a little bit quicker. We are running after misses. We are running after turnovers. We are running after makes. We want this to be more of an up-tempo style. We want to attack, put our foot on your neck early if we can. And so like that popped very early on in that first quarter. And even with going back to Kristaps being in action, I think it was 17 reps with him as the screener defender per second spectrum. And like the efficiency numbers were technically good for Dallas when they went after Kristaps. But you look at what those possessions actually were, and it's Kristaps' strong contest on a Luka step back three. It's the pick and roll split from the right wing. Luka gets downhill and he has to finish over like 3 different Celtics to get a layup to go. And it's just like, yeah, that adds up to points on the board. And I think it ended up being over 1.1 points per possession on any trip featuring Kristaps defending a pick and roll. That's technically bad. In terms of the actual shot quality, one, Boston just defended Luka well, I felt like. And on top of that, the types of shots that Luka was taking are the ones that Boston is ultimately okay with, like in the macro sense. We don't want 2 on the ball if we can help it. We don't want to allow shots at the corner. If you are getting stuff at the rim, then they're going to be heavily contested. And, you mentioned the assist stat for Kyrie, only 1 for Luka. I think 7 potential assists for Luka in this game. So they just did such a good job of just kind of keeping Dallas in a box. And as I was watching back this morning, I was kind of wondering, okay, how do they move Kristaps around? Because obviously they're going to put him in action. If he's in a drop, like that's just a natural pocket of space for Luka or Kyrie to try to get to. If they're going to switch, they should feel good about being able to get by him. When he's not directly involved, if they don't want to kind of fall into Boston's hands of using Derrick Jones Jr. as a screener or Josh Green as a screener or PJ Washington as a screener, when he's not directly involved, where is Kristaps going to be? Because something that popped out on the rewatch for me was just the possessions of Kristaps passing someone off. Here's a pre-switch. I see y'all are trying to put me in action. I'm already in the corner. I'm already at the block. You take this Derek White. You take this Peyton Pritchard. You take this Jaylen Brown. I want to stay lower on the floor. And so I do wonder, looking ahead to the game too, what does Dallas try to do to counter that, if at all? Do they feel like it's just do better within what they're already doing, or are they going to be more intentional about, hey, let's make sure Kristaps in the strong side corner if we're not going to use Derrick Jones Jr. as a screener, if we want to try to get Derek White switched on to Luka instead? Or, quiet as kept, like Luka did have successful possessions against Jayson Tatum as a driver in that game 1. If he wants to poke at that matchup a little bit, do we want to be more intentional about our spacing, making sure you are in the strong side corner, so I have more driving lanes? If y'all are going to give us paint shots to limit the corner threes, we're going to make these the most fruitful rim attempts that we can get and see if we can make you move that way.
Well, I think it all ties together to a degree. I think I'm eager to see what Dallas tries to do more of in game 2. Do we see more empty side actions? Do we see, more stack pick and roll? Do we see more slips? Do we see double drag come back? Like, what can they throw to try and mix things up against Boston switching? I can speak, no worries. I think to the Porzingis point, PJ Washington's going to be the key. So being intentional with the rotation, if Porzingis, which I would assume is going to continue to come off the bench, making sure that you get PJ matched up, and now, hey, we can put him on the wing, and maybe that helps. The only problem with that is it's not necessarily, or it hasn't been established for Dallas's side that this is a series where Porzingis has to hover to help, if that makes sense, because of Boston's principles. Like, even you go back to that first quarter stretch, Luka was like, hey, Sam Hauser, come here, buddy. PJ spaced on the wing. They stayed at home and they were able to battle. Kyrie said, Sam Hauser, come here. They stayed at home. So that's where I think the balance continues to be, where they're going to have to make plays to make Boston feel like they have to do something different. If they don't do that, you can shift him around the board all you want. If he's not leaving or feeling like he has to leave, the pressure is not the same. So I think that's kind of where the battle is for both of these teams. And ultimately, I don't want to sound redundant, but it is on Dallas to make Boston blink, to make Boston feel like they have to do something different, to put them in that zone where, do we switch? Do we switch and double? Do we feel comfortable about this matchup? That's the key. I think that starts with Luka and Kyrie. Because, I mean, we can talk about a whole bunch of stuff, but the biggest stat to me, Dallas, 35 made field goals, 9 assists. 9 of them.
Yeah, that's tough. And from Zach Cram of The Ringer, lowest assist rate in any finals game since the NBA-ABA merger for Boston, a 25.7 assist rate in that one. Excuse me, for Dallas. If you can't create easy ones, or if the ones that you do generate, they just don't fall. Again, we got a wide open PJ Washington 3 off a pop he missed. Darius Jones Jr. from the left wing, I want to say earlier in that game, on a pop, missed. Josh Green used as a screener above the break, passes up a 3, goes into a push shot at the free throw line and misses. And it's just like, well, if you're not going to be able to ding that, you're not going to be able to ding that, like naturally assist numbers aren't going to be there. But like broader sense, if I'm Boston, why do I have to do literally anything differently? I don't. We can just keep you in this box. Luka, congrats on your 30. 8 of 14 on twos. Like, you got some nice drives, got some mid-range jumpers to go. Cool. What did everyone else do? Kyrie largely didn't have it, and the role players largely didn't have it. PJ Washington had 14, didn't make a 3. Derrick Jones Jr. ended up making a 3. But those are the shots that Boston's okay with giving up. I'm with you. Like, I don't want to sound redundant either, but I'm just really interested to see how Dallas goes about moving Boston defensively.
Well, they're gonna have to move them. And before we get yelled at by the entire state, you gotta tip your cap to Boston.
You sure do.
You gotta tip your cap to Boston for their performance. They are a very good basketball team. Do they have question marks? Yes. When they answer them, is there a ton left to say? Not really. You know, no. I kind of zoom out real quick. We talked about like the paths that both teams had to victory, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's another scenario where Boston, once again, whether you want to discredit them or not, they did everything they were supposed to do. They took care of business. You know, and I think especially with some of the things they did offensively, they didn't get out. They didn't get in their own way. You mentioned the tempo that they played with. Well, they didn't get in their own way for most of the game. I'll say that.
So the third quarter got a little funny.
They almost did the thing, but their drives forced different rotations from Dallas. They put pressure on them in different ways. They read the defense. They kicked for threes. You mentioned they mixed switches and drop well defensively. Like they presented a wave where you're watching that. It's like, okay, Dallas has to take something off the table so that we can kind of see what the vision's going to be. So, you know, I want to salute Boston. And they set the tone right from the jump, man. That little opening sequence, there are 2 sequences that jumped out to me. They go the empty side pick and roll, but instead of Al Horford being on the wing, it's Tatum. And now swing to Horford, drive dunk. Oh, cool.
That's different.
Dallas scores, giving up a Derrick Jones Jr. 3. Drew Holiday just takes and makes a pull-up 3. I was like, all right, they are here.
They are juiced and ready to go. And we talk about setting the tone in that first quarter. Like, we've already talked about Kristaps, like mostly, you know, early in this conversation, mostly along the lens of what he's doing defensively, where he is, what coverage he's in, etc. Offensively, though, that man came out ready to fire, not just taking threes, but taking deep threes, did not care about your contest. And inside the arc, reestablishing himself as a post threat or a mid post threat, isolation threat, however you want to word it. Him just getting the ball and looking at his defender, no matter who that was, and saying, you know what? I am taller than you, actually. I am just going to shoot over your outstretched arm. I'm going to give you a little bit of a jab and then shoot over you. I'm going to swing through, try to draw a foul. It doesn't work. I'm still bigger than you. So this is still largely an uncontested shot for me. And I will get this to go. And I just love the way that he came out offensively whenever he saw a pop, or again, even on a switch and he had a small defender on him. I'm either diving and establishing position and making you think, do I want to send help? Do I not? Make you uncomfortable? Or, okay, fine, I'll station out here. He's smaller than me. I can still pose the same threat as a shooter out here. Just his presence alone changed a lot for Boston. Again, we've already talked a lot about the defense, but offensively, his level of spacing, when he isn't directly involved, is still more room for Jayson Tatum to get downhill, where I feel like his drives were very important. The efficiency numbers won't speak to that. Go back and watch game one. But this drives really set the tone in that game one. Jaylen Brown, again, mentioned at the top, 22 points for him. He had more room on his drives with Kristaps on the floor. You can't send the same amount of help at the rim if Kristaps is spaced out there. And so I was just really impressed with how quickly Kristaps came out and announced that I was here. But just his presence on both ends, I think, changed a lot for Boston.
Well, you shouldn't be surprised. Folks, if you're out there listening, do yourself a favor. And I apologize to Knicks fans and or Mavericks fans, but look up Kristaps Porzingis shooting against his former teams this season. I don't know what happened. I don't know what it is, but he has gone ahead and said, I'm shooting it and I'm going to make it. And it's just, you're going to have to deal with it. I do find it a little ironic that Porzingis for so many years worked to master the I'm taller than you shot and then said, actually, let me just seal and I'll work through that. And then showed the mastery in game one of the finals, but that's a different topic for a different day. I thought he was really important because that game was very much in the balance.
Mm-hmm.
I think he came in, Boston was up 1, Dallas had the lead right back, and then, back forth, big run, and everything kind of changed from then. So his ability to space the floor, be in different spots, mix in the roles as well, and the timing of attacking those switches was key. Because now we're getting points, even though you're doing what you're supposed to do defensively. And now we're putting the pressure back on you to score with what we're doing. So I thought they were just really timely buckets. And for him to get in a rhythm was really important. I think overall, just pulling it back out, I think the Boston Celtics did a lot of good things offensively. And I think one of the things we had in the balance was, one, will Boston get in their own way? 2, how will Dallas respond to the challenge from Boston? Because Dallas had come off two, almost 3 really good series of saying, hey, your drives, we're taking them away. We're going to defend it. We're going to show help. We're going to rotate. Boston has the talent, the spacing, and the willingness to take threes. So who's going to win that battle to start? And actually, will Boston even want to drive enough to make this a pressure point? And you mentioned Jayson Tatum setting the tone. I thought Jaylen Brown did as well. There were different things that the Celtics did, I thought, to kind of just make Dallas not defend with the same amount of conviction or find ways to open things up. I think the quick decisions from Tatum and Brown really stood out as far as we're not necessarily going to let you get all the way set. We're not going to pull this back and go 18 ahs. Quick in and out, quick split, quick hesitation and drive. Reading where the gaps were on the floor, I thought they did a really good job. I thought the spacing was very good. I think making sure you can clear wings to give more space was a smart move. The other bonus was using Jrue Holiday and or Derek White in the dunker spot. Yes, I did the thing.
Aha.
That was a key to really dinging Dallas's rotations and opening things up. So if you were able to clear those wings, you mix up where players are, you keep Dallas on their toes. And now, why is this important? You go back to the OKC series. You go back to the Minnesota series. Every series is different, but context. Dallas consistently found a way to nail that late rotation at the rim, to nail it near the paint, to always show a body. They had size on that rotation for the most part, and they had help points they were comfortable with the skips going to. And so it did have a little bit more of an automatic nature to it, to where we can just lock in on this. We know where our recovery is. We're good to go. When you put Drew or Derek White in that dunker spot, that's giving a different rotation. That's making Dallas think about something different. A lot of times putting Kyrie Irving down there. And one of the benefits of putting a guard in the dunker spot, even though it clogs things up, sorry, JJ, but guards are used to seeing penetration and just stepping up the floor. It's like a magnet. It's the same reason you put a big on the wing, because they don't really, this isn't really my normal rotation. So I'm going to be a magnet to the paint. The size is different. So even though someone's stepping up, I feel like I may be able to finish, or I could take an extra dribble and I could find the defender. And now, okay, what's the next thing? If you're driving to the left side, that left corner man is thinking, oh, this is my help. No, not really. Or if they'd step up from the dunker spot, the person in the other corner is thinking, oh, I need the help. That's the basket. And now you're feeling, okay, what do we do? I think you saw that. And I think Jayson Tatum did a really good job of finding the space, finding the gaps, and getting that late commit and then kicking it out. I thought that was really key. And Dallas, keep an eye on this for the next game. Dallas did have a couple possessions where they were able to get Kyrie out of there, and PJ Washington or someone with more size was down there. Or Gafford was able to work and say, hey, you know what? Al Horford's on the wing, but I'm going to take the low man. This is my rotation. But Boston kept dinging that so that you didn't feel the impact of them doing a good job.
That's good stuff there. I want to hand track just all of the offensive possessions for Boston to see how many times they had a guy in the dunker spot. With the pick and rolls in particular, it was 11 reps with someone in the dunker spot, generated 1.1 points per possession on those trips. So to Steve's point, just an effective means of making the rotations different for Dallas, removing some of the size from Dallas, and thus creating easier opportunities either at the rim or when everyone sinks out, 3-point opportunities from there. So I'm glad you brought up the dunker spot portion of the program. And kind of tied to that, as Boston was able to kind of play with some of the matchups they got, switchiest game of the postseason for Dallas. They very much went into this saying, Boston can do a lot. If we are in rotation, we're in trouble. We're a little bit more willing to switch our bigs in this one. We're a little bit more willing to switch, period. And largely, it made sense. And the efficiency numbers, particularly in that second half, we kind of showed that it was quote unquote successful. But it did not feel like the containment was the same. It did feel like even on some of those possessions, Boston was able to drive some stuff, force the defense collapse, kick out, shot misses, which again, going into tracking data that logs as a 0. But in terms of the overall process and how they were able to make Dallas move, those possessions were present throughout that game. And so if Dallas is going to switch as much as they did in game 1 or around the same realm, it makes sense logically. Let's try to flatten this out. Let's see if we can get Boston to get in their own way. Like we saw some in the third quarter with a lot of first screen is coming with 14 on the clock. We're now setting up this isolation with 11 on the clock. We're now loaded up. Let's have some fun. The switching can play into that. But if you are going to switch that much, the containment is just going to have to be better, period.
Now, here's the thing. I don't know if it's pushback, but it's a thought that came up. How much of that is the containment not being as good? How much of that is the help not being as early? How much of that is overhelping or bad timing on the help? And how can Dallas find the balance there? Because it's a point you mentioned in the preview pod about the threat of Boston in transition. I'll bring it back up because I pushed back then. And, accountability is important, et cetera, et cetera. They got a lot of those cross matches in transitioning with Tatum or Brown on a big, and they look to attack that right away. But again, the tricky part is, can we now just trust our big in the same way we did before to, even if you get beat, keep sliding and contest? Let's see if you can make those plays. Let's see if we can do a better job of keeping the ball in front. And, ideally you would like to contain and contest, but hey, if you beat us off the bounce, you got to make a tough one. Mm-hmm. Can we do that without fouling? Can we stay at home and feel confident with that? That's kind of the rhythm where I'm thinking, is that the adjustment for Dallas? Do we now balance when we send our help? Do we not send as much help? Do we make you make these plays one-on-one? Is that how we bog you down to give you a little bit of this bait? What are you going to do with it? Game 1, that was an automatic drive and kick. Game 2, you got to drive and finish. Just thought.
No, I think that's a fair thought. And it kind of ties in overall with, I guess, what does Dallas look to do differently, period? Because you mentioned some of the scram switching that they tried to sprinkle in, and Boston was able to ding it. Like on that in particular, I wonder how much of this is just going to be pressing the do better button versus maybe we can't do that anymore. We just have to guard our yard. We just have to be steady. And if we are going to have smaller players having to rotate the rim, like it just has to be more timely. It just has to be more detailed. We can't have the play that you pointed out during the watch party last night. It can't be Kyrie looking to draw 3 separate charges in the same possession. Like we just have to recognize if you are in this spot, this is your responsibility. Everyone else has their own responsibility. You got to trust your teammates to do what they need to do for us to be able to get a stop and ultimately get out on the other end.
I think from the Dallas perspective, and I think it's one of the things that head coach Jayson Kidd said post game, a little bit of coach speak, but they'll get better as the series goes on. That's typically been true for Dallas, especially on the defensive end. And I wonder, we've always seen a difference for Dallas between game 1 and game 2. And my mind goes back to the Minnesota series where it's like, hey, you know what, Cat, we're going to double you in the post. That's what we're going to do. And then, you know what we didn't see for the majority of the rest of the series? Doubles on Cat in the post. So how much of this is, okay, we can't do that much with the help? It's a different series. So, this has been good for us. And honestly, that's a tough part of the playoffs. You find something that's successful. You keep having success with it. And it's like, oh, yeah, this is what we do. And the other team's like, no, it's not. It's like, oh, well, let's
Can't
not
do that
do
anymore.
that as much. So is it switch, play off, give a gap, try and get some pull-ups, timing the help a little bit better, staying at home? Like my mind is thinking they may pull back on some of the aggression and maybe show bodies, but kind of filter back out and make Boston make plays. Now, that's not saying Boston can't make them. And if Boston's going to have the right mindset to, again, make quick decisions, move the ball, space the floor, drive and kick, it's still going to be the same problem. But can you make Boston think about it? I think is probably one of the keys for me as far as that goes. But I 70-69 second through the fourth quarter.
Well, this is why you don't get blasted in the first quarter. You know what I mean? But no, like I guess just to quickly bounce off the Jayson Kidd point, like something we talked about post game last night. Like if you look at all the game ones for Dallas in this postseason run, it's kind of just been, if for the 2K players ahead, just the default game plan. We just do what we do. If we win, great. If we don't, okay. We know it will work, and we just got to do it better. And or we know we absolutely can't do this anymore, or we absolutely can't play this guy anymore. And then they adjust in game 2. So, like, in addition to it just being a game 1 thing, and like, well, Kyrie in particular, again, didn't shoot well. Have a funny stat on that portion. Didn't shoot well, but like he's been in a series to where, oh, this looks like it's over, and then they end up winning. So, like, you don't want to overreact to game 1s anyway. But with Dallas, they've very much just been we will just go stock right now, see what works, see what doesn't, and then we'll just press all these buttons in games 2, games 3, games 4, and kind of flow from there. So I don't think anyone should be hitting the big red button. This game 1 was a very loud, if this is what it looks like, we ain't going to be here for very long type game for Boston. But to your earlier point, like, I don't know if this is a series shifting, Dallas can't do it anymore. Like, I don't think it's fair to go that far.
Very impressive performance from Boston. But again, it's the playoffs. You have to sustain it. You have to do it again and again and again.
Mm-hmm. So I just want to get to some quick shout outs. While we're on Boston, you mentioned Sam Hauser a little bit earlier. Got the possession, switched out on the Luka. Luka loses the ball. You get a little bit of a scramble there. It's like, okay, Sam Hauser moving the feet. A little bit later, it's Dallas trying to set up a pick and roll, trying to set up something for Kyrie. You get one of the pre-switches from Kristaps. Like, hey, you go out there and deal with this. You get the switch on to Kyrie in the left corner. Kyrie shoots a 3, misses it off the side of the backboard. I was like, hey, Sam Hauser holding firm in game 1 of the finals. This is fun. Also helps that he made shots on the other end. So, what was it, a plus 17, I think, in 16 minutes for Sam Hauser in the game 1? Like, I think you will take that if you're the Boston Celtics. On the Kyrie front, as he is highly regarded as a scorer, and rightfully so. That man is ridiculous. He lives on tough shots, great finisher, etc.
Hold on. Go ahead. What type of bar are you about to drop if that's the start?
Hold on, you being too nice.
Hold on a minute, player. Hey, look at me. Don't ever start anything with me with highly regarded, because I know you about to come with something nasty on the other side. What you got, Nekias?
Not even nasty, just from Second Spectrum, as they have like a shot quality metric based on contest level, shot distance, shot type, all that good stuff factors in what the average player is expected to shoot on these shots. Kyrie had an effective field goal percentage in that game one of 31.6, which is very bad. To be blunt about that. The expected field goal percentage on those shots was 45.3. So underperformed his shot quality by nearly 14 percentage points. That is his worst mark of the postseason. And the Mavericks are now 1-3 this postseason when Kyrie underperforms his shot quality, which is very much like a sample deal. But like I did find that interesting. The one win was Game 5 against the Clippers. The 3 losses: Game 1 last night, Game 4 against Minnesota, and Game 4 against OKC. And so again, like, and looking at just his average like shot quality throughout the postseason, like they're all between like 40 to 45 in terms of what you would expect him to shoot. And again, because it's Kyrie, he's outperformed his shot quality in all but 4 games this postseason. That's just how talented he is. But that's kind of I guess, an example of just the feast and famine portion of it. When he doesn't get the tough ones to go, and like when we saw on a few occasions, like you just saw pick and roll Kyrie against a deep drop, pull up 3 miss. Like those are shots that those are open for him. But like it does feel like that's at least a little bit of a bellwether. When he's off, and to Steve's broader point, going back to the series preview, it may be a little bit easier to allocate resources to take Kyrie off the table versus Luka. One, Luka's better, but beyond that, like Luka is bigger / better passer. So if we put 2 on him, he can see over the top. We got openings, et cetera, et cetera. For Kyrie, as talented as he is, he's what, 6'2"? We can put Drew on him and feel good about it because of how good Drew is, but that's similar size. You are seeing size in the drop against Kristaps. So it's not going to be an easy finish for Kyrie, even though, again, he's a tough shot maker. He can make those shots. But conceptually, what you're trying to limit, it's kind of easier to do that to Kyrie. And so it was just interesting to see like how drastically he underperformed based on the shots that he took in that Game 1. So that's something that can swing in Game 2. We'll naturally keep an eye on it heading into the Game 2, but I did want to drop that one at least. That wasn't too bad. I think that was a bar.
No, you're good. You're good. It's interesting to me as you were stating that. My mind kind of went to the 3-point battle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how important that is for both sides of the equation. Because Boston is now, let me double check. Look at me. See what happens when I start talking numbers. Boston did make 16 threes. So they are now 8-0 this postseason when they make 15 or more threes.
I was just about to say, hey, you brought up.
Yeah, a pat on the back. Dallas is a 3-3 when their opponent makes 15 or more threes. So keep an eye on that. I think the biggest thing for Boston overall is you cannot get bored with success in this series. And for me, it's less their willingness to take threes and more the types they can generate. And so, according to NBA.com's data, Boston attempted 42 threes. 30 of those were in the catch and shoot variety. They shot 40%. That's the key for me. If you're Boston, we need to continue to get the drive and kick and generate the quality shots we can. If you're Dallas, we need y'all to be a little bit confident and take some of these pull-up threes and change the quality of those to where we're not necessarily giving some of these up in the same way. So that's kind of where my head went.
I got you. Like, I'm glad you brought the 3-point numbers. As you mentioned, the makes and the records when Boston makes that many, when Dallas allows that many. The attempts, as we cycle through the math battle that Boston wants to win and Joe Mazzulla has been so adamant about. +9 on made threes is huge in today's NBA. But the fact that Boston took 15 more, like that's not, those aren't waters that Dallas can wade in comfortably. Can't say it's going to be impossible for them to win because, again, in terms of the 3-point attempt number, like we saw it in Game 1 against Minnesota. And we saw how that game ended. So not impossible, but against a team like Boston that just wants to take a lot more than Minnesota does, if we're going to use that direct comparison. It can't be that. It can't be that. And then even just looking at the percentage of shots that came from 3. So zooming out from the number, the total number, 29.1 3-point rate. So 29% of Dallas's shots came from behind the arc. 4th lowest in the game this season. It can't be that. And I'm glad you brought the catch and shoot number because like one of the things that I was thinking about was like even the threes that Dallas got, again, they lost the volume battle handily and you just can't have that. But I'm looking at how many of those threes were self-created for Dallas on top of that. Like, it just kind of ties right back into the broader conversation of all the switching and all the drop, et cetera. Like, you're not getting the corner threes. Basically, Boston just isn't in rotation like that. Like, they're losing the volume and the quality battle on top of that. Like, it can't be that in game two. Very dull analysis there, but it can't be that in the game two if Dallas wants to get back into this one. And again, a salute to what Boston was able to do in that game one on both ends. Did you have more shout outs or you want to? This is the opportunity to empty some notes if you would like.
Well, my mind's just thinking and wondering if you're Boston, do we get a better Derek White game? Does Jayson Tatum score in a better way? Does Jaylen Brown just keep playing? Like, Jaylen Brown's been playing at a high level all playoffs long. I mean, it's you might as well just pencil him down for 20 points, over 50% shooting, and figure out the rest later. He's just been at a high level. But hey, I mean, does this become a pathway series for Boston to a degree? To where, hey, we had the Porzingis game. Now you got to deal with the Drew game. Now you got to deal with the Derek White game. Here's Jayson Tatum. And now, okay, we stick with our pencils. We stick with our concepts. Different people do the thing offensively, and we put you in a tough bin that way. Or if you're Dallas, hey, if Porzingis doesn't do that, and maybe we keep Tatum shooting this way, and hey, Derek White's a little quieter, we advance into the fourth quarter zone where all that stuff you feel about Luka and Kyrie and staying at home does not feel as good in theory if both are going. So that's where it's like, okay, there's still some balances here, but impressive stuff. I'll quickly double check my notes to make sure I didn't miss anything I wanted to say.
You good. Well, while you check your notes, I'll quickly dish on the Jays. I wish I could remember which account I saw it from first to give the proper credit, but the Celtics now 5-0 in this postseason run when Jayson Tatum shoots under 40% from the field, which speaks to the overall one. Tatum can just impact the game in other ways. Defensively, the rebounding, the playmaking, the way that he sets up shots with his drives. Again, we talked about what he did in his game one tonight, but also speaks to the overall talent of the roster. If Tatum doesn't have it, you can get this kind of performance from Kristaps as he's back. You can get the timely shots from Jrue Holiday. You can just get, and largely have been getting this from Jaylen Brown, who, in addition to the drives, over 1.3 points per possession on any trip featuring a Jaylen Brown drive per second spectrum. But in addition to the drives, the defense from Jaylen Brown, taking on the Luka assignment, and Luka largely not being, he wasn't treating him like someone that has no business defending Luka Doncic. Like, we've seen plenty of games in this postseason and throughout the year where here's a slightly smaller wing. Luka just says, get out of my way. I am bigger than you. I am stronger than you. I am getting to my shots. Jaylen was able to provide at least a little bit of resistance. And I think if you can get that kind of two-way impact from Jaylen Brown, like, I'm sure we'll get into like award stuff a little bit later down the line in the series and stuff. But like, if you can get that, you feel good if you're Boston. Again, you get this kind of win without Jayson Tatum having a capital G game as a scorer. Largely set the table. Like, you got to clean up some of the turnovers he had. Some of those are just self-inflicted. Can't have those in a finals game. But it's just been fun watching Jaylen Brown this postseason run, period. His drives have remained important. The post-ups and some of the pull-ups inside the arc have been good. Only 2 of 6 from 3 in this one. But like, the timeliness of the threes that he makes to either cap off like a 13-2 run for Boston, or, hey, this team is scored in the last 3 possessions. We're kind of cold right now. I will just knock down this shot to kind of quiet y'all down a little bit so we can set our half-court defense again. Like, he's just been a really timely shot maker in this postseason as well. So I want to salute him there. And as I was talking a little bit about the Jaylen Brown pickup points, it's something I referenced during the watch party as well. Shout out to Steph No, who had a tweet just with a lot of different clips about Boston bringing some full or 3/4 court pressure and trying to bleed the clock a little bit. Also, I want to give him his props for tweeting out the video compilation there, which caused me to look that up. There were 39 reps of Dallas bringing full or 3/4 court pressure, which was a postseason high for them. The average length of possession on those trips was roughly 18 seconds for Dallas. And you zoom out just to the overall number, average 14.7 seconds per possession. So that's a big, over a 3-point gap there. So when they brought pressure. So we will see if we see Dallas counter in game 2 of, hey, let's have Derek Lively screen at half court or behind half court to just get Luka up the floor a little bit quicker, or Kyrie up the floor. Do we see some of those hit aheads? Because it was a similar dynamic in the Minnesota series. Well, going back to like Minnesota, Denver is the first thing I thought of on that front, to where, hey, we're just going to pressure Jamal Murray. Maybe not turn him over. Let's just bleed clock and make y'all get into your stuff later. And so we'll see. And we saw Denver kind of counter. Aaron Gordon, you bring the ball up. Jokic, you bring the ball up. So I'm curious to see if Dallas kind of takes that script. Hey, let's just toss it ahead to PJ, then flip it back. So I just wanted to empty that one. Do I have anything else? I think that's gonna be it for me. 10 points on 7 combined post and ISOs for Kristaps. We talked about him a little bit earlier. Just did not care who was on him at a certain point, particularly in that first quarter. So I think that's it for me on the notes front, or at least the fancy stuff.
No, I mean, it's fascinating. If you go back and you watch that second half, you kind of see different layers, especially as Dallas responded initially before Boston said, actually, no, thank you. Like, if you're Dallas, you hold Boston to 9 points and 2 made field goals in the first 7 minutes and 33 minutes of that third quarter.
Mhm.
You kind of got to try and bottle that up. And so they tried different things. You know, there were a couple times where Luka, hey, I'm just going to pre-rotate and just stand here. If you have an ISO, we're going to be a little bit more physical on our switches. We're going to time it and get back out to contest. And that's going to flip the pressure back to Boston. I think ultimately this is a principal series. Who can stick to theirs? Who can convince the others that theirs isn't good enough? Again, it was a statement game from Boston, flying around on defense, executing on offense, really understanding the assignment, and they have to keep doing that. From Dallas, we got to take some off the board. It can't be this combo. The drives, we got to slow that down. We got to score on the other end. We got to find a way to do it. But if I'm Boston, we got to keep you in this box as long as we can. We got to make it as tough on Luka and Kyrie. If our defense is there, that gives our offense wiggle room. If our offense is there, we put pressure on your offense. And so they have to keep that advantage as long as they can. It's fun stuff. We wanted to see what they were going to do in game one, and boy, they did a lot.
That they did. I think last quick note as I was like looking back through because my eyes are just not great all the time. Postseason high in terms of blow-by rate on drives for Boston, to speak to the containment point. Saw a lot of help on those drives, but to your point and just the earlier conversation about how Boston was spacing their personnel in different spots, even if the help was there, it's not the same level of help, and thus forcing collapse and thus creating open shots. So I think that is going to do it for me. A congratulations to the Boston Celtics for winning game one. Very excited for the game two to see what the counter punches are going to look like.